very, very early on the Wednesday morning between the death and the funeral. And I just sat down and wrote it. And it took about an hour and a half and just came pouring out, really. Actually,
there is a man who has spent almost 30 years saying almost nothing. No memoir, no sit-down interview, no documentary appearance. While an entire industry built itself around his sister's face, he did the one thing nobody in modern celebrity culture seems capable of doing anymore. He stayed quiet. His name is Charles Spencer, the 9th Earl Spencer, and he is Diana, Princess of Wales's younger brother. If you know him at all, you almost certainly know him from one single afternoon. September 6, 1997, Westminster Abbey, a black suit, a lectern, and a eulogy that made the crowd outside the church erupt into applause, so loud it rolled through the open doors and into the nave itself. That speech is a matter of public record. It is one of the most quoted funeral orations of the 20th century, and in it, Spencer made a promise that Diana's blood family would help protect her sons and see that they were raised with the same open heart she had. That's the last big public moment most people remember him for. And that is exactly what makes it worth asking. What has Charles Spencer actually done with the 28 years since? The honest answer is, almost nothing you've seen. He has not sold access to Althorp's private archives. He has not shopped a memoir. He has not appeared as a talking head in the dozens of Diana documentaries that have aired since her death. And if you go back and actually watch those documentaries, you'll notice they all pull from the same recycled pool of public footage. Nobody has ever gotten the family's private material. That's not a rumor. That's just an observable pattern across nearly 3 decades of Diana content. So today we're going to talk about why that matters, what's reportedly been happening behind the scenes in 2026, and why, if the rumors swirling around royal media circles this year are even partly true, Charles Spencer may have just delivered one of the most consequential no's in the entire Sussex saga. I want to be upfront with you. Some of what follows is confirmed, sourced, on-the-record information. Some of it is speculation and theory that's been circulating among royal commentators. And I'll be clear about which is which as we go. This is a story where the temptation to blur that line is enormous, because the confirmed facts are genuinely dramatic on their own. So let's not blur it. Let's build this properly. Ask the casual observer to name a Spencer family member, and you'll get Diana, maybe her sons, and then silence. Charles Spencer occupies an unusual position in royal-adjacent public life. Enormously consequential, almost entirely invisible. Here's what's actually documented. He inherited Althorp, the Spencer family's ancestral estate in Northamptonshire, where the family has held land for roughly 5 centuries. He made the decision to bury Diana on an island within the estate's grounds rather than in a public cemetery or church plot, a decision that has kept her actual gravesite largely private and shielded from the kind of pilgrimage tourism that surrounds so many other famous graves. He has, across multiple decades, consistently declined interview requests about his sister. Journalists who've covered the royal beat for years will tell you the same thing. Spencer is one of the hardest gets in the entire ecosystem of Diana-adjacent sources, and he has stayed that way through the tabloid frenzy of the 2000s, the 20th anniversary retrospectives of 2017, and every documentary cycle since. That consistency is unusual. Almost everyone else with proximity to Diana's story has, at some point, cashed in some version of that access. A book, an interview, a paid appearance. Spencer's refusal to do that isn't just personality. Royal commentators have long theorized it's tied to something more specific: guilt. Here's a piece of history that is genuinely well documented and worth walking through carefully, because it's the emotional foundation for everything people are now speculating about. In 1995, Diana sat down for the BBC's Panorama program and gave what became one of the most consequential interviews of her life, the one where she famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." That interview shaped public perception of a royal marriage's collapse for a generation. In 2020, a formal independent inquiry led by retired Judge Lord Dyson found that the journalist behind that interview, Martin Bashir, had used forged bank statements and other fabricated documents to gain Diana's trust and secure the interview. The inquiry concluded Bashir acted in a deceitful way that breached BBC guidelines, and the BBC itself issued a public apology. This isn't speculation. It's the conclusion of a formal inquiry, widely reported at the time. What's also part of the public record? Charles Spencer has spoken, on the record, about his own role in that chain of events. He has publicly stated that he was the one who first introduced Bashir to Diana, and that he deeply regrets it, given what came to light about how the interview was actually obtained. That's not a theory. Spencer has said this himself in statements around the 2020 inquiry. So when royal commentators suggest that Spencer's decades of silence and archive guarding are connected to a specific and enduring guilt over having unknowingly helped facilitate the most psychologically damaging media moment of his sister's life, that's not a wild leap. It's a reasonable inference built on something he has said publicly himself. Whether it's the entire explanation for his behavior or one factor among several is something only Spencer actually knows. But the through line is there, for anyone willing to look. Now let's ground ourselves in more recent, verifiable territory before we get to the speculative part of this story. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle signed a significant multi-year content deal with Netflix after stepping back from royal duties, reportedly valued in the ballpark of $100 million over 5 years, though the exact figure has never been officially confirmed by either party, and estimates in the press have varied. Their first major release under that deal, the docuseries examining their departure from royal life, became one of the platform's most watched documentary debuts. What followed has, by most independent accounts, had a harder time matching that ceiling. Their lifestyle series with Love Meghan drew a genuinely rough critical reception across a wide ideological spectrum of British press. Outlets that rarely agree with each other on anything royal-related landed in similar territory when reviewing it, several using words like dull, or accusing it of being tone-deaf given its focus on lifestyle content like brunches and home entertaining. Their separate ventures, a podcast deal with Spotify that ended, and Meghan's lifestyle brand, have had mixed and, in some cases, publicly reported setbacks. None of that is speculation. It's a pattern visible in trade press and entertainment coverage throughout 2024 and 2025. What this pattern suggests, and here I want to flag clearly that we're moving into interpretation, is that content built purely around the Sussex's post-royal lifestyle has struggled to replicate the audience pull of their earlier, more explicitly royal family-focused work. If that reading is correct, it would make sense that the most valuable asset remaining to any future Sussex media project is proximity to Diana's story, specifically her 30th anniversary year of 2027 being an obvious commercial hook. This is the part of the story that has been circulating in royal commentary circles throughout 2026, and I want to be honest with you. I have not seen this confirmed by a named source at Netflix, by Buckingham Palace, by Kensington Palace, or by anyone in the Spencer family's camp. What exists is chatter, reportedly sourced to unnamed insiders, suggesting that some kind of anniversary documentary proposal tied to the 30th year since Diana's death was pitched, and that it would have required access the Spencer family has never granted anyone, the private archives at Althorpe, personal diaries, home footage. If a pitch like that existed and reached Charles Spencer, it's not hard to imagine how he'd respond, given everything we just walked through about his documented history. A project asking for the one thing he has refused everyone for nearly 30 years, arriving at a moment when it could plausibly serve as a ratings rescue for a struggling content slate. That's a combination that would make almost anyone skeptical of the motives involved, fair or not. But I want to resist the temptation to hand you invented quotes or a scene-by-scene account of a private confrontation that nobody has actually verified happened. What I can tell you honestly is this. Given Spencer's 3-decade pattern of behavior, if any such pitch was ever made, the smart money says it was declined. That's not confirmation. That's pattern recognition, and I think it's worth being upfront about the difference. Where we're on much firmer ground is the broader, well-documented state of the relationship between Harry and the rest of the royal family. Multiple credible outlets have reported, across 2024 through 2026, that there have been efforts at limited reconciliation, including reported meetings between Harry's representatives and royal communication staff, alongside a persistent, unresolved rift specifically involving Meghan, who by most reporting remains a much harder sticking point for the wider family than Harry himself. William and Catherine's relationship with the Sussexes has been reported as essentially non-existent since 2020, with no confirmed direct contact reported in years. King Charles's own contact with Harry has been described in multiple reports as limited and strained, notably during and after his cancer treatment. The consistent theme across credible reporting isn't any single documentary or interview. It's a broader, long-simmering trust problem. Royal family members have reportedly expressed concern, through unnamed sources over several years, about private conversations or reconciliation attempts becoming material for future media projects. Whether or not that's a fair characterization, it's been a persistent thread in reporting on why reconciliation has stalled. Stepping back from any single rumored pitch, here's what's genuinely interesting about Charles Spencer's position in this whole saga, and it doesn't require any speculation to appreciate. He occupies a role almost nobody else in this story can occupy. He's not a working royal, so he has no constitutional obligation to stay silent and no institutional apparatus to answer to. He's not a Sussex spokesperson, so he has no commercial incentive pulling him toward cooperation with any media venture. He's family, blood family, with genuine morals standing tied to Diana specifically, not just to the institution of the monarchy. And he is, by every observable measure over almost 3 decades, someone who has consistently chosen restraint over opportunity, even when opportunity would have been extraordinarily lucrative. That combination is rare. It's part of why, whenever his name does surface in connection with a Diana-related controversy, confirmed or rumored, it tends to carry more weight than statements from almost anyone else in this extended, complicated family. He has spent nearly 30 years building exactly one kind of credibility, the credibility of someone who says no to money and opportunity when he believes his sister's memory is at stake. Before we get to the closing question, I want to spend a minute on something that doesn't get talked about enough in coverage like this: the strategic value of saying nothing. In modern celebrity and royal media, silence is usually treated as a vacuum, a gap that gets filled by whoever's willing to talk. That's generally true. It's why so many public figures eventually cave and give the interview, write the book, sit for the documentary, even when they'd rather not. The pressure to control your own narrative usually wins out over the discomfort of exposure. Charles Spencer appears to have made a different calculation, and it's worth understanding why it works for him specifically in a way it wouldn't work for almost anyone else in this story. He doesn't need press coverage to maintain his position. He's not building a media brand, running for anything, or trying to sustain relevance in an attention economy. His public standing is already fixed, anchored permanently to a single afternoon in 1997 that most of the English-speaking world watched live. That gives him something genuinely rare, the ability to simply not participate indefinitely, without any real cost to himself. Compare that to Harry and Meghan's position. Whatever you think of their choices, they operate inside a media economy that requires content. A production deal isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing relationship with a platform that expects output, engagement, and audience retention. That structural reality shapes decisions in ways that have nothing to do with anyone's individual character or intentions. It's simply the mechanics of how modern content deals work. If a slate of projects underperforms, the pressure to find the next big swing is real, and it's institutional, not personal. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation about incentive structures. Spencer isn't inside that structure, which means when he says no, he's not weighing content calendars or platform relationships. He's making a decision based purely on what he's decided he owes his sister's memory. Whether you agree with where he's drawn that line or not, it's worth recognizing that it's a genuinely different kind of decision than the ones being made by people whose livelihoods currently depend on producing content. That asymmetry, one person who needs nothing from the media ecosystem sitting across from people whose careers currently run through it, is, I think, the real engine underneath a lot of this speculation. It's why rumors about a blocked pitch, confirmed or not, resonate the way they do. People sense the power imbalance even before they know any of the specific details. Here's where I want to leave you, because I think it's the honest, substantive question underneath all the noise, rumor, and speculation in this story. Diana's legacy doesn't belong to one person. She was a mother to two sons who each carry a completely legitimate, completely different relationship to her memory. She was a public figure whose openness about her own struggles genuinely changed how the world talked about mental health, about divorce, about humanitarian work. And she was a private person whose family has made a specific, consistent choice to keep large parts of her life out of public circulation. Those three things sit in real tension with each other. Harry has a claim to his mother's story that nobody else alive can fully replicate. He lived it, as a child, in a way that gives his perspective genuine weight. At the same time, the argument that some things a mother wrote or filmed privately for her own family were never meant for a streaming platform is also a serious, legitimate position, not just gatekeeping for its own sake. I don't think there's a clean answer here, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I pretended there was one. What I do think is worth remembering, whatever side of this you land on, the most consistent, most verifiable fact in this entire story isn't a rumored letter or an unconfirmed documentary pitch. It's 28 years of one man saying no to nearly everyone, in an industry built entirely around saying yes. Whatever comes next, and if there's real news to report on this, we'll cover it the moment it's confirmed, not the moment it's rumored. That pattern is the part of the story that's actually earned your trust. Thanks for watching. If you want us to follow this one closely and only bring you confirmed developments as they happen, subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.